what really showed me something that I could not unsee there was researching what other researchers had found when they took a drop from a vaccine vial and put it under the microscope, and I saw the photos of what they found. Because basically what they were finding was these are not things that should be in a vaccine. It had nothing to do with helping people prevent getting a certain disease or sickness.
That was one of the things I found in researching how to help people recover from adverse events from those things is, what am I actually trying to help people overcome? And there's, to your point, there's just so many things that shouldn't be there, or there's things where like, is this a bug or a feature that this is in here? And so, yeah, it is a quagmire. You already mentioned that one of like, wait, what's in these shots? Welcome to the Deconstructing Conventional podcast. This interview is brought to you by Healing United, a private membership association committed to helping you reclaim sovereignty over your health, life, and future. You could say our tagline is question everything and rebuild intentionally. In the audio format of the show, there's additional commentary before each episode, and there are also over a dozen audio-only episodes. You can find the show anywhere you listen to podcasts, including the Healing United PMA app. Look for it in the App Store. And if you want to learn more about the work we do, and especially how we help people heal when the doctors have no answers, visit us online at healingunited.today. Now, on with the show. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode. My guest is Sally Saxon. She is a graduate of Northwestern University School of Law in Chicago. She is a retired attorney who worked for one of the biggest law firms in Seattle and also had her own practice for a while. She served as the executive director of a legal foundation focusing on unlawful or abusive government actions. She's also the author of Globalists on Trial, The Hidden Agenda to Destroy America from Within, which was originally published in 2020 and with a new edition expected next year. She is also the lead author on an award-winning book written in collaboration with two medical doctors. It's titled the COVID-19 Vaccines and Beyond, What the Medical Industrial Complex is Not Telling Us. And sure, as my listeners are familiar with, they probably know a good amount of the contents. But that book, really what I like about it is it presents compelling evidence that tells just a very different story than what the corporate media told us about the COVID vax. And I guess I describe it as a forensic audit of really the many ways that we've been lied to about virtually every aspect of it. And it's also a book about the bigger and I'd say uglier agenda behind the shots. And Sally and her two co-authors are also working on an update to that book as well, expected to be published hopefully by the end of this year. So one other cool, relevant context for this interview is that she comes from a family of healthcare professionals. Her dad was a family physician and surgeon and one of the few voices of his generation to warn about the dangers of government intervention in healthcare. Sally's also a minister of Christian International, and she's actively involved in that ministry. So Sally, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking the time to join me today.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Christian. It's really an honor to be here, and I'm just a big fan of all that you do. So
well,
thank you for what you're doing to just really help people in so many ways.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for saying that. So one other thing I'll mention, if I'm not mistaken, you've completed a half marathon in every state of the U.S. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And a total of over 100 half marathons plus 10 full marathons.
My goodness.
In my 60s.
So just I wanted to get that out there because there's this a remarkable human I'm talking to today, very educated, long history in so many different ways. But Sally, give us your backstory. What led you to become an attorney in the first place? And how did you get into becoming an author and really writing about such big, controversial topics?
Oh, my goodness. Well, what led me to become an attorney in the first place, it was actually not a whole lot of thought went into it. I started out as a music major in college because I'd been very active and focused on music, throughout, most of grade school, junior high, high school, and thought I wanted to, be a professional musician, but I wasn't quite sure. And after one semester in a music conservatory, I decided, no, I do not want to do this the rest of my life, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. One of my friends who was also a lawyer and had the love for music, he just suggested, well, you'll probably end up being a lawyer. And that's how it got started. And I really never gave it much thought to, well, what do lawyers really do? Even though one of my uncles was a lawyer, still that's what got that started. And so I practiced law for several years in Seattle. I no longer live there. But when I was with the big law firm there for several years, most of my work was doing research and analysis, like legal analysis, writing memoranda and briefs, with the analysis and stuff, putting all the legal arguments together. So it was a very natural kind of transition to just being an author. And it's essentially the same skills and the same things, just in different contexts. And but it's like looking at the evidence, and especially when you see, there's a problem here, something is not right, and then, well, what is the problem? What's the evidence, surrounding these issues? And Christian, one thing I thought about recently was how we have these major controversial issues in society, but it occurred to me that at least for most of them, most of the ones I've been writing about in any event, there really wouldn't be much controversy at all if the truth were known, if people really looked at both sides of the evidence. Because on a lot of the issues, like the COVID vaccines that we wrote our book about, the evidence is really, I think, very one-sided. The solid, credible evidence is very one-sided, and it's not what you're hearing in the corporate media, as you mentioned earlier. And so if most people knew, both sides of the story, and we're not just making judgments in the court of public opinion that's driven by the corporate media, I think their views and perspectives on various issues would be very different, and there wouldn't be much controversy at all.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I was excited about having you on is because you are an attorney and you have to look at evidence through the lens of, could I prove this in court? And when you take that approach to things, you're much slower to just believe whatever you're told and say, well, what can we prove? And sure enough, your book is just a tome of proving things, to your point, that people don't want known out there. We'd rather just be able to manipulate you and tell you what's real rather than have you actually look at the evidence. And so I guess I'd love to know, what was kind of your big, I can't unsee that moment when it came to COVID? When did you know this was about so much more than just what we were being told in the media?
Okay. Well, first I have to back up and say that I first became aware that there was a much bigger agenda going on way back in the early 90s, when I read a book by a gentleman named Gary Kah, K-A-H. It was entitled En Route to Global Occupation.
Oh, wow.
And when I read that, it's like, I did not want to believe it. I thought, no. It's about, a group of wealthy elites who had an agenda for a one world government. And that was my first introduction to it. And I did not want to believe that.
Yeah.
Like most of us don't when we first hear that. And if we know what, their bigger agenda is. But when I looked at all the evidence that he was presenting in his book, just so many primary source documents, I mean, the documents of the very people themselves, you can't refute that. This is what they're saying about what their plans are for the world. And for the most part, these are unelected people who just have their own vision and, started to gain control over all the major institutions of society and so forth. And they had an agenda. Now, at that time, we didn't know as much about their full agenda as we know now, especially, what COVID has exposed. But so that's kind of a foundation where I already came with that understanding and knowledge that there was, a much bigger picture to a lot of these major events and crises that we've experienced in our country. So when COVID, was first started being discussed, well, I guess one of the first things that hit me was, when they started talking about lockdowns and things and the other measures, masking, and then especially when they started to say there are no effective treatments, for this, And I thought, no, 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 no. This is just one of their schemes,
Hmm.
another one of their schemes. And so that was a big clue for just the COVID part. Now the vaccines, it was a little bit different. What really showed me something that I could not unsee there was when I was researching what other researchers had found when they took a drop from a vaccine vial and put it under the microscope, and I saw the photos of what they found.
Yep.
That you really couldn't unsee. I mean, because basically what they were finding was these are not things that should be in a vaccine. It
Yeah.
had nothing to do with helping people prevent getting a certain disease or sickness.
Yeah, that was one of the things I found in researching how to help people recover from adverse events from those things is like, what am I actually trying to help people overcome? And there's, to your point, there's just so many things that shouldn't be there, or there's things where like, is this a bug or a feature that this is in here? And so yeah, it is a quagmire. So you already mentioned that the one of like, wait, what's in these shots? Were there any other things that just surprised you or kind of were jaw-dropping moments as you were writing this book?
Oh, there were several things. I would say one of the main things was, because I already had the background and the foundation of knowing that these wealthy elites, have a bigger agenda and so forth. Because I had that background, I wasn't surprised that they would just do anything to try to advance their agenda. But what surprised me was the extent of all the lies, deceptions, corruption, and everything that they did. It just was, practically every single point that I was researching about the vaccines, and also about just COVID in general, but especially on the vaccines, practically every point where they could lie, misrepresent data, manipulate data, cover up data, suppress information, make stuff up. They did it. And it just was like incredible that they were able to just do this with seemingly with impunity, not even caring about the results,
Right.
because they had their agenda in focus and they knew what they wanted to do. And they were telling us what they wanted to do, but a lot of people were not paying attention. And so, like, yeah, that was one of the surprising things. Another was the extent of the harm done by the shots, as well as what people were finding to be in the shots, and that was surprising. Plus, just when you think about an octopus, and it's got its arms in everything, going every
Mhm.
which direction, just the massive amount of coordination
Right.
on so many different points and getting so many people in positions of power and authority at different levels to go along with what they were dictating should be done, what needed to be done. That was rather stunning, even though I was aware of the big picture and their agenda generally. But their full agenda really went beyond what I was aware of before. So
Yeah.
that's partly what our second book is going to be about, is going further. What is the end game of all this?
Yeah. No, that was really what kind of smacked me in the face was the breadth of the industry and regulatory, even government capture that this just, they had infiltrated everything, which is, I was just kind of in the health lane and the pharmaceutical and medical industrial complex. I got that, but I didn't realize it kind of applied to pretty much every industry and that government was just almost like their appendage, it's this thing that they manage to get us to go into a particular corral or way of thinking. And yeah, that was censorship was one of my other big ones. I'm like, I guess the First Amendment's just a suggestion here. We're not really going to defend that, and there's no penalty for violating it. And yeah, it was thorough. So What was it that led you to, or I guess you can respond to that if you want, but what was it that led you to write this book? Like, you don't have to do this, but something's compelling you to do it and then to write another one. So help us understand that a little more.
Right. Well, there were two basic things. One was, as I started discovering how much harm was being done by the shots, listening to testimonies of people who had suffered serious adverse reactions to the shots. It was so heartbreaking because it upended their entire lives.
Yeah.
It's not just that now they've got these major physical problems they didn't have before, but they lost the job. In many cases, they lost the job that they took the shot to keep.
Right.
But they end up losing it anyway. That was very sad. Now they've got the physical problems, plus because they're not able to physically do all the things, it totally upended their family life, and their marriages, the relationships, not able to do certain things with their kids that they used to be able to do, plus the financial hit, because not only did they lose an income from not having their job, but now their medical expenses have substantially increased because their insurance companies were not covering a lot of the costs. And so, they're having to come out of pocket for remedies, and a lot of them couldn't afford certain kinds of treatments, and going from doctor to doctor to try and figure out what's wrong. Plus, their doctors were, in many cases, were not supporting them at all, because their doctors often said, "Oh, we think it's just in your head." And whether that was because they really believe that, or because they were being threatened or intimidated to not put down on the patient's chart that, oh, this is vaccine related. You see, they could get in trouble, because remember, now we've got electronic records thanks to Obamacare, that they have to write everything down. So the doctors have somebody looking over their shoulder, well, all the nursing and the nurses and so forth. Somebody's looking over their shoulder to see, what they're doing, what they're prescribing, what their diagnosis is and stuff. So if they're truthful and they realize it's a vaccine injury, some of them are very reluctant to even do that, much less to report the injury or adverse reactions to VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, which they're legally required to do if they suspect that is a cause of a problem. And so we have that. So it was those heartbreaking testimonies was one inspiration, but the other part of it was, exposing which the bigger agenda and the big picture that all things COVID fits into, which some people, other people are exposing that, and we're not unique to that, but every book, every interview, every person who speaks out about this is reaching a different group of people. And so we need more voices to speak out and, expose the bigger agenda behind this, as well as the dangers of the shots. But I was thinking the other day, it's not just enough for people to know the fact that these shots have caused tremendous harm, both in terms of unprecedented numbers of deaths and serious adverse reactions, but also it's important to know why they're causing this. What is it about these shots? Because that is relevant to now and going forward, and what is being done with technologies, and what, it's not just a matter of shutting off the COVID shots, but when you understand why they're causing this, then that helps with diagnosis as well as treatments. But it's a much bigger picture than that, and our book is still very relevant for today, even though it came out about a year and a half ago, because of the issues it raises that really go beyond COVID and help to make people aware of all these, of the big picture, first of all, that all things COVID fit into, but also, just the many ways in which people have been, deceived, by this. And we we don't want people to be deceived, because that leads to decisions about their life, and that affect not only their life and their families, but everyone else too. So as a whole, as a nation, we need as many people as possible to be aware of what's really going on.
Right. Well, and thank you for doing that work. I know it's thankless and tireless, and I've been a kind of a researcher in parallel with you, just finding similar things and unearthing stories and evidence. And it's just at some point you kind of cross I can't not talk about this. I can't pretend I don't know this. And for you to create this time capsule of a record and something for other researchers to build on and find evidence, it's a gift to humanity. And to your point about it continuing to be relevant, if you haven't been paying attention, they're hell bent on getting this mRNA technology into everything and turning pretty much every medication into, and they just call them a vaccine now. No matter what you've got, we just have a vaccine for diabetes and cancer, and as if we can say that word and somehow it's now protected and perfect, and that they're even trying to sneak this gene editing into our food. It's in organic yogurt and kombucha now. It's everywhere. And once you get that there's a threat here, that's why this kind of evidence becomes really compelling and important. So anything you want to say in response to that?
Well, that's part of what we'll cover more in the second book. It's already there to a certain extent in the first book. But yeah, the threats that we now face because of the Pandora's box that, that COVID, opened of several different things that we really need to be aware of. And it's like now, one of the things, the big lessons, I think, from the COVID era, even though the health emergency might be technically over, as much as we'd all love to put COVID behind us, we really can't, partly because we still have a lot of people, suffering from serious adverse reactions, but also because of these threats that we've become aware of to an even greater degree because of COVID. And, in addition to things that we knew before, like some of the things that you mentioned. It's having that understanding, but we need to take, one of the lessons is that, we need to take more personal responsibility for our own health, because a lot of the doctors, medical doctors and other healthcare providers don't know, what COVID has unleashed, what's in these shots. They don't know how to properly or accurately diagnose a person's problem. So, you've probably heard of people too who had a serious adverse reaction to the shots, and they went from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor, trying to find somebody who could figure out what their problem was. And that's a very difficult thing. Like if some of those doctors kind of read our book, they'd get a clue and realize that, oh, this has something to do with a vaccine. And that's one of the problems now, is that both patients and doctors, a lot of them have not yet made that connection between some of their new health problems, and the vaccine. And if they knew that the vaccine was responsible for this certain condition, then it would really help, both doctors and patients to know what direction to go as far as treatment and diagnosis as well.
Yeah, I've referred to it as ABV disease. It's anything but vaccine. It can't be that. So we have to chase down every other possible idea for where these symptoms might be coming from, and never entertain. And it's to your point, it's the uncomfortable nature of entertaining. Could this be? And what does it mean that I missed it, or maybe that I participated in it, or I acted from fear? It just brings up so many uncomfortable questions. But at some point, we have to be able to step back and say, maybe it is that. And to your point, if we can't say that, then we're going to be chasing the wrong rabbits indefinitely. So thank you for writing that and bringing it into the light. Okay.
Yeah. And it's a challenge because, I can understand why people don't want to believe that our own government could be doing something intentionally to harm us. Because that's what it comes down to. When you look at the fact that the government knows, the pharmaceutical companies know without a doubt that these vaccines, these shots, are causing unprecedented numbers of deaths and serious adverse reactions.
Mm-hmm.
They know that.
Yep.
And yet they not only have not pulled them from the market, they continue to push them even on babies as young as 6 months old. Yep. And they're on the childhood vaccine schedule now. So that should, send, all kinds of safety signals and warnings, like to parents, to everybody, that there's something going on here, because ordinarily under their normal practices, if they were aware that a certain drug had resulted in 50 deaths or even less, right, or so many serious injuries, the drug would have been pulled off the market very quickly, either voluntarily by the drug companies or by the government. I mean, that's been the past practice.
Right.
And if you were to apply those same criteria that they've used in the past to these shots, well, first of all, they would never have been authorized in the first place.
Right.
But once they were, the shots should have been pulled,
right,
like within the first month.
Yeah. Well, in 1976, I created a webinar called the C19 Vax webinar. You can find it on my website. But in 1976, there was a quote unquote swine flu outbreak. And so they rushed the vaccine to market, and I think like 45 people died, and they pulled it off the market. And
not even that many.
Yeah. And before the manufacturers had liability back then, today they don't. And so what's uncomfortable about looking at this honestly is that somebody like a lawyer, what I love you and others have been able to do is you can now show intent. And that's the ugly part, that this wasn't just an accident and good people doing the best they could under pressure circumstances. There was malicious intent built up over a long time, and there was a rollout. And then now that the evidence of harm is here, like, anyway, never mind, as you were. And there's no will to course correct and make ask for forgiveness or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. And so there's some real sinister things going on here with the whole vaccine campaign, and even with the 1976 swine flu vaccination campaign. It lasted only 2 months. Actually, I think they had less, maybe only 25 or so deaths associated with that, and maybe several hundred cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome.
Yep.
And they pulled it off. Okay. But the big difference, as you pointed out, was the pharmaceutical companies still had liability then. They don't now. Well, or do they? But that's a whole nother issue. But on paper and, so far, the pharmaceutical companies have been able to escape liability. So, when I started doing a little research the other day on product recalls and when were they, under what circumstances were different products recalled, I found that in most cases, like once the FDA, for example, found, contamination of bacteria in some kind of food or something, the manufacturer voluntarily pulled it off because they knew they had liability if they didn't, pull it from the market, and people got really sick or something or died. They'd have a lot of liability. So just that threat of potential liability was enough to cause them to make corrections very quickly. And so when you compare that to now, when there's no liability, and now over 3.5 years later, with huge unprecedented numbers of deaths, I mean, people will be amazed at what the actual estimates of death are now.
Right.
That's coming out in our second book too. It's like, why haven't these shots been recalled long ago? And that's where we're.
Yeah. Well, as we talked about shaping this interview, we thought it'd be, because there's so many details like that, and your book does a good job of laying it out. So we don't need to go through every instance of all the different shenanigans. But one thing we thought might be a service to humanity was just to to help people see through a propaganda engine, to help us sharpen our discernment, because we kind of just now have to live out this mantra of question everything and attempt to do that without being paranoid, but also do it with a desire for fairness and a genuine effort to seek truth. So one of the things I like about your book is you just kind of go through some of these deep state tactics, we'll call them, these different ways that we are manipulated or gaslit or led to believe something that's not true. And so I think you've got something like 17 that you sent me, like, oh my gosh. So we're going to probably stick around half a dozen, because so we just don't make this a 5-hour episode. But so talk us through some of the things that you learned or that became the most obvious or helpful ways people can see through this attempt to make us malleable, manipulative humans who will just follow whatever the propaganda engine tells us. Help us sharpen our discernment in that arena.
Okay, sure. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there's a foundation of understanding that there's a bigger picture and an agenda behind all this. And if a person does not understand that, they're going to not understand, anything else about COVID, this whole crisis. Okay, so one of the big things is that they, we're talking about this group of wealthy elites who have a lot of power and control over practically every major institution of society, that they've built that up over many decades, and especially when they control the major media, or I should say the corporate media, but they're less and less in the mainstream than they used to be because of the explosion of independent media now, which is a good thing. But the when you have the mouthpiece or the platform of the corporate media to help spread your narrative, you can create the perception of a lot of things that are not true. But so one of the big things that they do is they love to create their own crisis. In many kinds. Most of them are like a financial crisis, a major financial crisis, health emergencies, and terror acts or war. A lot of their things are in that category.
It's
as well
theatrics,
as climate change. We should add climate change in there. That's a biggie. Okay, so all they have to do is create the perception of this big crisis, which they were able to do very successfully, with COVID through many different ways, and they do this because then that enables them to do a little quantum leap. They can do a series of quantum leaps to advance their agenda, and because when you have a crisis, it kind of causes things to shift, and take that quantum leap. You have an acceleration of everything, so that there's always a new normal, a new level that you can't ever go backwards. So they tend to create their own crises through a whole series of steps to create the perception of stuff. But now, I should say it does have real impacts.
Sure.
For sure. But it's the fear mongering that comes from creating the crisis that leads to the negative impacts, whether it's financial impact or deaths from COVID. I mean, people did die from something called COVID, but it was never, when you look at the evidence, the strong evidence, you see it was never a dangerous global pandemic.
Right.
But that was the perception they needed to create in order to get to the next step, which was the vaccines, which are also not vaccines by legal definition. So they create their crisis to cause a reaction of, so much fear and anxiety, like, oh my goodness, there's a big dangerous global pandemic. What should we do? Oh, okay. So what did they do? The lockdowns, the face masks, the social distancing, and then finally the shots.
Shutting down Main Street in favor of Wall Street. All the small businesses are not essential, and the big ones are suddenly.
Right. And I guess the thinking behind it is, if you create a crisis or the perception of a crisis that's big enough, it'll cause the fear and anxiety that leads people to make different decisions than they would otherwise make.
Yeah.
And so that's,
yeah, we wanted you guys to have that reminder. Some of you already know this, but when you see more crises rolled out in the future, pump the brakes for a second, pause, take a deep breath and say, is this another fake story? Is this another manufactured crisis? Yes, it can have real world implications, but it is also manufactured, and to what end? Who's benefiting from this? We have that discernment when you see more large scale crises get rolled out to us in the months and years ahead.
Right. And actually, these crises usually serve many different objectives.
Right.
It can cover financial. It can, they want to weaken the individual finances, weaken the economy of the whole country. They want to cause division between peoples. They want to put small businesses out of business and favor the big businesses. If they want to depopulate, they'll do something that will kill off a bunch of people, that will disable a lot of people, make people more dependent on the government or on the state or on this group of unelected people who've self-appointed themselves to these positions of power and authority over everyone. So yeah, but I agree with you. It's like, okay, when another big thing comes along, ask yourself just the questions that you just posed. Is this real, or is this just another scheme, to advance their agenda?
Yeah. Does this take away or add to my self-sufficiency? And usually it's if there's some independence you have that's not in line with what they want. So there's reasons you need to follow orders. That's one of the ways you can sniff out an agenda like that.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah. And so another thing they use is throwing around the term conspiracy theory.
Oh, I love this one.
Yeah. I mean, I love that one too. And that term arose and came into popularity several decades ago. Apparently by the CIA. They figured this is a great tactic to throw people off the track, to divert people's attention away, from what they're really doing and behind the scenes, and just say, oh, that's just conspiracy theory, and what those people are saying, and that's been debunked a long time ago, so let's just go on from here. And so it's just a diversionary tactic. And the fact of the matter is, there are conspiracies. This is. And one of the quotes in our book by David Rockefeller, who's one of the top conspirator families, that's part of this whole big picture and agenda. I mean, he even came out and admitted in his memoirs.
Yes, page 405.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it when I read it the first time many years ago. I had to go to the library and check out the book myself to see, and it's like, oh my gosh, he did in fact say that. He basically admitted that, just like a lot of people had accused him and his family, of conspiring against the best interests, or that they were part of a cabal, a secret cabal, working against the best interests of the United States, and conspiring with people all over the world to form basically a better one world political, economic, structure. And he says, if that's the accusation, then yes, I plead guilty and am proud of it.
Yeah.
And then there are other things. Even John F. Kennedy warned us about this monolithic organization. So there's so these are not just theories. Conspiracy just takes two or more people agreeing to carry out a certain agenda. And so we've got a lot more people than that. So when you see, or when you hear that term applied to any particular thing, for the most part, not 100%, I would say, but for the most part, you'd probably be safe to assume that it's not theory.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
fact.
Right. Well, I want to
But
park on this one for a second because it's like I've come to accept it as a compliment rather than an insult. It's meant to be, to your point, a pejorative. It's meant to be a put
yeah,
down to
yeah,
people. And one of the things I love doing on this show is defining our terms. So, okay, let's take conspiracy theory and let's define it. Well, conspiracy is describing theory. So, what's a theory? A theory is just a guess. It's that framework to try to make sense of what we're seeing. And a conspiracy theory is we're trying to guess what people might be conspiring to do based on evidence. And they
mhm,
could be conspiring to sell you a chicken sandwich, or they could be conspiring, like the Rockefellers, to take over the world. But to be able to stand and recognize that people use it as a dismissive term, to not have to entertain the merits of your argument or look at evidence, it's an easy thing to recognize and call people out on, or to frame and point out that they're doing what's called an ad hominem attack. They're attacking you, or they're attacking the messenger, rather than looking at the evidence. And if you can calmly, kindly point that out and recognize that, well, there's all sorts of theories about what might be going on in the world, and no one knows everything. So I'm trying to form one, and here's some evidence, and keep them from making it personal and make it more about the evidence. That can go a
yeah,
long way. And to your point, most of the time it's the lag between a conspiracy theory to conspiracy fact keeps getting shorter because it's
yes,
easier to sniff these things out now.
yes, yes. And another thing that they do, it's kind of related to this, is what's called the big lie,
Yep.
which means that people are more likely to believe a very big lie than they are to believe some smaller lies, because it's really hard to get your head around certain big lies, like COVID, saying that COVID was a dangerous pandemic, and we've called that a lie. It's hard for people to imagine that anybody that they should be able to trust could possibly be intentionally scheming to
Yep.
harm us. That lies, it's simply too big to believe.
Yeah. You just think no
That
one
they
would
would be
do
doing
that.
that. Yeah, and so this was a tactic of the Nazis, as you know, that the bigger the lie, the easier it was for people to accept, because otherwise it was just too much to get their head around. So the big lie is very effective. And in this case, that there was a dangerous global pandemic that threatened the lives of millions and billions, hundreds of billions. And another tactic they use is to accuse the enemy of the very things that they're doing.
Right.
And in the context of COVID shots, for example, or all things COVID, the term misinformation spreader, comes to
Right.
mind.
Perfect
Like,
example.
who is really spreading the misinformation here? And yet many doctors have lost their jobs, have lost their licenses, have lost certifications, have lost positions as editors of journals, things like that, because they dared to speak out what they knew to be true from their own practice, as well as from the government's own data and from Pfizer's own data. It's right there, in black and white. And yet the government, they do so many things with their data.
Yes,
Well,
they do.
they ignore it, they manipulate it, and they misrepresent it. For example, the CDC for the longest time, and maybe also still now, although I think they're admitting a little bit, they were saying, no, there have been no deaths associated with the COVID vaccines. While their own database, well, not just one, but the VAERS database, their military database, the CMS, the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, that database is and maybe others as well, we're all showing deaths from the vaccines, even like many of them the same day they got the shot. or the day after or within a
Mhm.
couple weeks after. And yet, they're saying, oh, there's no deaths,
Right.
here. So
Yeah, those fit so well in that big lie framework because a lot of times it just seems like they're making up numbers or they're statistical. What's the quote? I think it's there's lies, damn or lies, damn lies, and statistics, right? There's
yeah,
you can take statistics and just bend them any way you want. I think Fauci just goes on TV, he's like, yeah, I'll just make up some numbers on the spot. Like you go try to look up what he said, and there's nothing to fall back on. But he's like, he wouldn't just make that up. There's got to be something somewhere that we haven't found. And no, they just
yeah,
lie. And once you get it, that's just they're speaking their native language. They rely upon you expecting no one would do that. And
yeah.
then it's like, come on, it just sounds too crazy. There's probably a good explanation. And we just move on with our lives, not realizing, no, that was intentional.
Yes. Yeah. And for example, related to the vaccines, oh, the vaccines have saved hundreds of thousands or millions of lives.
Right. Wait, do you have a
Okay.
citation for that?
Yeah. Well, you'd be surprised. We're addressing that in our second book too, specifically.
Nice.
Yeah. Or how about this one? Well, even though the vaccines they may not prevent transmission, they may not prevent you from getting infected, but at least they reduce or lessen the severity of symptoms. And there's no evidence of that.
Yeah. Right.
It's a great line that supports their narrative, but it's like there's no evidence that
Yeah.
is true. But it sounds good.
No, it does. And Fauci gets to go on and just tell people how hard he worked and how the science kept changing. And it's just this gross, continual retreat without
Yeah.
recognizing that, no, I'm just lying to you and I'm just doing it long enough till any consequence I could bear for this activity has passed me.
Yeah.
And the beat goes on.
Yeah. And one of the problems is that the people who are spouting the lies, like Fauci, I mean, he knows
Right.
he knows
This is
full
exactly
well
what he's doing.
that he's lying. So the people making these statements, even many doctors or other representatives of other government agencies, they seem very respectable. They seem very knowledgeable, very professional, but they're lying. And one of the problems here is they don't look like what we might expect liars to look like,
Right.
because their outward appearance and their credentials. But another part of the problem here is if you start getting into the big money, huge amounts of money that were thrown at a lot of people in various situations, like some of the researchers or writers of medical journal articles, some of the people who were, even in government regulatory agencies or in hospital systems, doctors' offices, there was just an unprecedented, enormous amount of money. We're talking many, many billions of dollars that were thrown at people to spread the word, to encourage people to get the shots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They
Celebrities too.
Celebrities, leaders in the communities, including pastors,
Churches. Yep. That's the ugly one.
Yeah, business leaders, other, politicians, others who maybe were respected, and they were encouraged to have their followers get the shots,
Mm-hmm.
and took a lot of money for it. And the problem was, if you took the money and then changed your mind and started speaking out against the shots, my understanding is you had to pay all the money back. Well, so
Right.
and this was true of like many of the medical boards or licensing agencies, departments of health,
Mm-hmm.
at various levels. So it's a big problem. But anyway, going on to another issue. This was demonizing
Yeah.
anything or anyone who was thwarting their agenda
Yeah.
or speaking out against their agenda. And so, like, for example, in COVID, a great example is how they demonized medicines like hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, and others, saying, no, those are not only not effective, but they're dangerous, and don't take these. That ivermectin is just a horse dewormer. And so they would demonize these things so that people wouldn't take them. And they've done that with some other, medicines also related to this, and warning people, not to use certain things because they knew those were the very things that would be helpful, that would stop COVID in its tracks in early treatment. So the government was saying, there is no early treatment. If you come to a point you can't breathe, go to the hospital then, but there's no early treatment.
Yeah.
And you got a lot of other doctors saying, what do you mean there's no such thing as early treatment? We've never had that. Of course, there's ways to treat these, and they were being very successful, almost 100% of preventing hospitalizations and deaths from COVID.
Right.
Well, the government, the vast majority of people who ended up in the hospital with COVID and were given the hospital government protocols, most of them died.
Yeah.
So,
those are, it's not just demonization of things that worked. For me, that one that you mentioned of just step back, rewind, and now think about it logically. There's nothing else in the world that you can possibly do for your health. We can't help you any other way. The only thing to do is wait till you get sick and then pray for a arm juice to show up that we can inject in you. And that's your only thing that can possibly help your health. Like that doesn't even pass the sniff test yet. We just kind of were in that trance and fell for it.
Yeah. And so there were a lot of things, that just did not even make sense.
Yeah.
Like for the doctors who said, what do you mean there's no early treatment? Of course.
That's what we do.
There are treatments. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but they were demonized and not listened to, even though many of those doctors had 30, 40 years of experience, and they were saving patients right and left. So in any event, that's another, thing that they do. So when you hear the media or the government, demonizing certain people or certain possible treatments, think again. It might be that the ones who are really telling the truth that you need to listen to are the people or things that are being demonized.
Right. I'm going to give one other example so you guys can look for this when you see it happening, because it's such a predictable, normal tactic. Is they accuse people of inappropriate sexual behavior. And then what the beautiful thing that does for them is that keeps them from having to divulge any other nefarious behavior that person has. Because we can put them away now. We can just fabricate some charges that they were inappropriate, and now they're gone. And all the other crimes they committed are now swept under the rug, which is probably what's happening with Klaus Schwab right now at the World Economic Forum. He's being accused of all this sexual misconduct. Never mind all the other gross things he did. We can just put him away for that. So if you see that, it may be gross, and it wouldn't be shocking if Klaus was engaged in that. But what it does is give them a free pass from the other things. And so just recognize that's part of their playbook to demonize people. Sometimes it's even of their own. I think Klaus has probably passed his useful phase, and he's the chew toy they're ready to spit out and move on to the next puppet who will do whatever they tell him to. So be aware of that one.
Yeah. And then there's also things like, silencing dissent. And they do this by, censorship. And probably most of your viewers know there has been massive censorship.
Overt and covert. Yes.
Yeah. And in this, and so it should make you wonder, well, why is it they don't want us to hear about this information? And why are they trying so hard? And then also, by deplatforming people, making it hard for some of the independent media to even continue, their messaging, because the government messes with their finances, or they do. It's just all kinds of things, and that leads us to like mafia-like tactics. Oh my gosh! And one of the names for this group of people is the Khazarian Mafia. Khazarian referring to the part of the world that this group originated in. and mafia, kind of describing the tactics that they use, where they not only lying and deception, but, threats, intimidation, blackmail, that those are big ones, or shaking down people. There's just all kinds of ways that they use, because they will do anything. They will do anything. They will stop at nothing to advance their agenda. It's like they've got no conscience.
Right. It's broken. Our heart of stone applies to them. Yeah. There's a disgust or even just repulsion at the human suffering or the human condition. And people are just a collection of randomly assembled molecules, not souls, there's nothing precious or important about them. And so they're just things to manipulate in nature. Yeah, exactly. And now, we see from some of the spokesmen of this cabal that they're even seeking to change what it means to be human. Yep. Yeah. And they come out with some statements that the rest of us, it's like, I can't believe they seriously believe this, or this is what they're trying to do. It's kind of like the agenda is so radical that it's difficult for normal people, to imagine that any other human being would have any thought of doing certain things to humanity, and intentionally harming and doing things. That's another reason, why it's difficult for many people, I think, to accept all these things that are happening, is because normal people don't think the way these people do. Right. Whether you want to call them psychopaths or sociopaths, I don't know, but they do, they do not think and act like normal people. Right. And appreciate that they rely upon our visceral repugnance to that to continue to keep it going. They know that it like, we can't conceive of that. And since I can't cross the intellectual bridge of why would someone do that, that's their opening. That's their window to keep doing what they're doing, because we just can't believe it's that bad or could scale to the breadth of what it is. And that's to their credit and our blind spot. Yeah. But I think we're at a point now where people cannot afford to be unaware of the big picture, of the bigger agenda, and the whys behind it all, and the ways that they use to deceive and manipulate, people and situations to serve their agenda, to advance their agenda. I mean, this is like not optional anymore to learn about this stuff, because we are in this war against humanity being waged by our own government and all those who serve them. And even if you want to look at who's behind all this, we're discussing that in the second book, but it goes way up beyond the people whose faces we see on TV. Right. There's higher levels than that, but the key is, like, what do we need to do? And of course, one of the biggest things that we can all do is just simply not go along with their agenda. If they're going to impose more lockdowns, masking, social distancing, shots of any kind, just say no. No, we're not going to do that. And because if they can't, we're much more numerous, in number than they are. They're just a relatively small group. And we're, hundreds of millions, billions of people all over the world. And so we should have the greater power, but we've got to be aware, and we've got to, resolve our mind. Well, okay, even if they impose the mandate for another shot, okay, we have a hard choice to make for those who are in that situation. Am I going to, go along with that again and do potential harm to myself and my family, as well as the others, or am I going to stand up and just say no more? Right. And because if they can't get us to go along with it, they're in trouble. But I think there are some major things happening right now, both financially, politically, and other
ways that are going to have a big impact on
Yeah.
all of this, but still, we're in uncharted territory here, and we need to have a much greater awareness of what's going on than most people have
Mhm.
right now. And everybody is at risk now.
Yeah.
When you've had the COVID shots or not, but it opens up a whole lot more questions of like, well, what about all the other vaccines,
Yeah.
especially the whole
No, man, there's
childhood
another
vaccines?
there's another deep
You
rabbit hole.
know, yeah, there's so many rabbit holes. But yeah, so I think we've covered a lot of different things today, and our big issue is not only do not comply and become aware. I mean, our book is a good source. It compiles a lot of things, but there are others, sources. There's so many other books and articles and interviews and so forth coming out on these subjects that it's kind of overwhelming. But one thing we could encourage our audiences to do is like take a book like ours and give it to somebody like a doctor who is not aware of all these problems, or some other people. We found that just putting it in their hands, you can't make them read it, but if they have it, hopefully it'll arouse some curiosity to at least start reading it. And if they open it to almost any page, they'll see something that may surprise them, that will pique their curiosity to read more. So if we had a little army of people who could help, even just giving one copy, to somebody who really needs the information, that would really, help a lot to wake up more people.
It certainly would. And thank you so much for writing those books. And I aspire to be an author someday. And I respect the amount of work and research that goes into making something. And I've done a good amount in making webinars and writing blogs and not even turned it into full page book or full blown books yet. And I know the work that is. And I guess I just want to start, as we start wrapping up, just echo what you said about being able to see through their tactics and recognize this is a lot bigger. COVID was kind of the kickoff party to their next phase. And if you are relying on anything mainstream media to give you a map of reality to make plans, you are not going to like where that leads. And so we encourage you to start forming a more accurate map of what reality looks like, and recognize some of these tactics we point out, that they are going to continue to try to divide us. They have to keep us fighting each other and not them. And as soon as we recognize who they are or what their agendas are, we can put down our swords and we can stop falling for stupid things like stop hate, which has no teeth to it. It's a way to cause division. And another example of, could we define our terms here? What stop what in particular? And recognize I'm not against you. There's a category for I could disagree with you and still like you or even love you. And that shifting that perspective and recognizing if we're arguing with each other, they're winning. And as soon as we start saying, no, you're lying to me, the vax wasn't good, the border isn't secure, the elections don't have integrity, and we go through the list of things that are actually the threats to us, and we can stand up and have a backbone and recognize this is going to go a lot better if we put down our hate speech and stop falling for their tricks to divide us. And there's a great quote. You pointed out the book to me, Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky, and I was just looking into that book some. And one of the things he mentioned, because I guess he was it's like, to me, it's almost like The Art of War. You can read that book for good and use it for bad either way. But one of the things he said in there was he was quoting a French philosopher who, quote, gravely warned that unless the individual citizens were regularly involved in the actions of governing themselves, self-governance would pass from the scene. Like we, the people, it becomes a relic if we don't actually do something and participate in the governance that we have or in the problems that we are facing, and do the work to build our parallel economies to get outside of this centralization of everything. So one, thank you for pointing out that book, and I'll let you have the final word and any other encouraging things you may want to say to people, but take the final word and then tell people where they can find your work.
Okay. Well, first of all, you can find the book on Amazon. It looks like this.
COVID-19.
COVID-19 vaccines and beyond, what the medical industrial complex is not telling us. And my final word, I think, would be that, even as many threats as there are that COVID sort of exposed us to, there is definitely reasons for hope and encouragement. And,
Yes,
more and more people are coming up with some effective treatments for those who are still suffering serious injuries from the shots, or even from what's called long COVID. I know Christian gets into that and presents many different options. So there's increasingly many things that can really help people, through that. But also, be encouraged by, if you're a believer that we were created and not evolved from the primordial blob.
yeah.
Our creator is doing some amazing things right now, and nothing is impossible for him. The cabal, the globalists, have their great reset that they're seeking to advance, but God has his great awakening. And it's not just awakening people to what's really going on in the world, but it's awakening people to his love, his power, and how he and his intervention can defeat this Goliath that we're facing in the end game.
Right on. Well, that's a great note to end on, and I would affirm what you just said, and we are never without hope. So, Sally, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom, for being in the fight with us, and it's just an honor to know you and to amplify your work.
Well, thank you so much, Christian. It's been such a pleasure and honor to know you and be involved with what you're doing. So it's my pleasure.
All right. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks. Thanks for listening to Deconstructing Conventional. If this conversation sparked new questions or helped you see things in a new light, feel free to share it with a friend who is on a similar journey. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode and a perspective that challenges the norm. Check us out on our website at healingunited.today and find us on social media at Healing United, or you can check out the Healing United PMA app. It's a great way to stay connected. Remember, question everything and rebuild intentionally.